To kick off our forum today with some amazing Latina Fortune 500 executives, I want to please welcome to the stage. She's the Executive Director of Myrna, a Latina organization. She's also one of the coalition members of HACR, our board of directors. Please welcome Amy Hinojosa. There you go.
Thanks, Sid. How's everyone this afternoon? A little bit of a tryptophan coma? That's all right. We're going to have a great panel this afternoon with these amazing Latina leaders and moderated by the wonderful Robert Bard. As Sid mentioned, my name is Amy Hinojosa, and I'm the president and CEO of MANA, a national Latina organization. We're the oldest and largest national Hispanic women's organization in the country, and proud HACR coalition partners for many, many years. And so we're happy to be here with you all here at the symposium. And before we get started with our panel, I would like to introduce our sponsor for this afternoon. Deneen Garcia is the Vice President of Diversity Strategies for Macy's. Welcome, Deneen.
Of course. What do you mean? You missed all the coupons on the registration desk out there? And you should have some in your bag. And I'm so glad. Who said that? You need a second and a third and a fourth coupon. So we'll make sure you get those. We'll make sure you get those. I love you. I love you. You're fabulous. Thank you. So everybody, it's a pleasure to be here today. And you might ask, why are we sponsoring the Latina Ambassadors Panel? And the question is, why wouldn't we? That really is the question. As indicated, I'm Vice President of Diversity Strategies at Macy's. And just to give you a little bit of insight into Macy's, over 70% of our employee base is female. Over 70% of our customer base is female, like if you didn't know that. And although the men are gaining on us, and Laurene can probably talk more to that since she's responsible for men's and kids, women are very important to the growth and to the success of our company. It's plain and simple, right? And we also love to shop and look good, and we're Latinas, and so of course this is the panel to support, okay? But first, let me just say two more things. I said first, and then I said two more things, right? But thank you to the HACR team. I consider them not only a wonderful organization that has a mission that we value, but I consider everybody on the HACR team a friend. Met them approximately 5 years ago, and they continue to be wonderful advocates within the community and within corporate America. And for those of us on the other side who sometimes have to navigate some difficult waters, they're a wonderful benchmarking organization and an organization that we can call upon to help. So wanted to thank them for that. And then finally, I just wanted to bring to your attention that one of the reasons why I thought this would be a great panel for us to support is because purely and very selfishly, we have a fabulous Latina. No offense to everybody else on the panel, okay? But we have a fabulous Latina at Macy's, and you'll hear more about her. But I consider her not only somebody who has grown throughout the business, but she is the highest ranking Latina at Macy's. She's an executive vice president. Thank you. I'll accept that applause for her because she always cringes when I start walking around with her and she's like, are you really going to introduce me that way? And I'm like, hell yeah. I'm going to tell everybody you're our EVP and I'm proud of it. But because of that, she's fabulous. She's wonderful. She has a lot of insight to share, and she's been a wonderful sponsor, mentor, and friend, and that's invaluable, as you all know. So finally, the last bit, I said finally twice already, she is involved and has been involved in the launch of our new line, our new Latina line, although she works across all lines, our new Thalia Saudi line, if you haven't heard about it. And she was instrumental in bringing that with Thalia and Tommy Mottola, so let her tell you a little bit more about that. So without further ado, Robert, it's your floor. Gracias.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Bard with LatinaStyle, and I want to begin by thanking also the HACR team for the wonderful conference that they put on. And Sid, it's okay to take the credit. Don't let Carlos keep repeating that he did it all. This is your team now. This is your conference, and you've done a wonderful job, and your team has done a wonderful job. For the past 21 years, since LatinaStyle was launched, it's been my honor and my pleasure and my luck to live in a completely almost Latina world. Once in a while, Latinos infiltrate, you know how they are. But mostly, my job is to marvel at the Latina talent that we have, in our community, that we have in our country, that we have all over the place. And one of the most incredible things that we find all the time is that Latinas can really do it all. Because the women that you can see seated here, they're corporate executives, they're mothers, they're part of their PTAs, they're running associations, they sit on boards of many organizations and nonprofits. They're committed to the community, while at the same time, they're fighting the inside fight in corporate America to do all the things that were mentioned at the luncheon by Catalyst, by the Catalyst speaker. What we have found with LatinaStyle in 21 years is that if you give an opportunity to a Latina to rise to a challenge, she will do so, and she will do that with flying colors. The challenges that they face is how do they get the opportunity, because the more accomplished they are, the more their bosses want to keep them around. So for the bosses to say, okay, we want to promote you, it's like cutting an arm off for them. So we have been able to assemble with HACR a group of really distinguished Latinas. And what we wanted to bring you was an experience that is as diverse as it is the same. Each one of these Latinas comes from a different industry that is quite, challenging, but every single one of them comes from a total different area of expertise. But yet they have been able to master their careers, they have been able to master their task, and what they all have in common is they have risen to the top of their companies. So on page 34, you can read all the resumes. I don't want to take more time from them because you want to hear from them. And let me begin by immediate right by introducing to Ileana Musa. Ileana Musa is with Merrill Lynch Bank of America. We heard that. That's okay if you need to sneeze on me. Don't hurt yourself. So Ileana, let's begin with you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Sure. Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo están? Ileana Musa, I work at Merrill Lynch Bank of America. I am the global client segment and strategy head for the business. So I have the responsibility for delivering to our global clients in the private wealth space. These are clients that live overseas around the globe, but are looking to have a relationship in the US with Merrill Lynch, and they invoke a lot of trust in us to take care of them and their families and help them achieve their goals and their outcomes, which is very exciting for me. I've been with the organization for 10 and a half years, and I currently live in Miami, used to live in New York for about 15 years, so I've come back to where I grew up, which is amazing. And I live there with my husband and my 2.5-year-old adopted daughter, Annabella. And so it has been an incredible journey, and what I would say is, as I reflected on the path, we all have stories, right? When you think about your personal journeys and how far you've all come, it's a compilation of stories, right? Those events that really define you as you move along. And if I put it on a chart, what I call sort of my lifeline, and you've got sort of like looking at performance. I'm on the investment side, so you look at the performance over a 50-year period of time. You have your highs and you have your lows, right? And you're looking at those things that are above the line and those events that are below the line. And when I think about my journey and my path, it's thinking about those moments, both above and below the line, that have really defined and made me who I am today. And I always stress below the line because I feel that those struggles really make and define you and make you a better and stronger person as you step through. So just by way of background, I was born in Cuba, immigrated to Miami, up until the time when I went to school, undergraduate and graduate school. Really what defined me was my work ethic. I grew up with a single mother of 3, came to the US, didn't have anyone here, we all know the story, worked day and night literally to make ends meet. And all along, my father stayed behind, never made it over, spent 15 years in prison in Cuba, finally got out, and I met him when I was getting ready to start college, which was a defining moment for me. But what I would say up until that point, work ethic really defined who I was because I observed a woman, a very strong-willed woman, make things happen. I observed a woman that asked for everything that she needed and wanted, more needs than want at that point, but nonetheless got very comfortable doing that, which I think is a unique skill and something that Latinas need to hone in on as you step through your career, because it is really important to ask, and I'll go a little bit deeper later. So by the time I started school, again, I was one of 3 kids. We all went to college, which was amazing. But the running tagline at home was, el no ya lo tienes, right? And I'm sure you've all heard that before as well, but it was all around resiliency, pushing forward, and breaking through. And so again, by the time I finished school, my husband and I decided to get married. He convinced me to move to New York. My mother hated the idea, but at that point she didn't have a choice, so I decided to go for the ride and take a chance. And that's really when I embarked on what I wanted to pursue as a banking career. And decided to work with headhunters, met somebody that we hit it off, and clearly not having experience in the field was a very interesting journey, but I landed a job with Bank Boston at the time, reporting to the person that headed up that unit covering the Southern Cone. And basically my value statement, my brand really at the time was, no one's gonna work harder than me, I need to learn the business, and in exchange I'm willing to do whatever this business needs to deliver for your clients. And so many people applied, but I think based on, I had an MBA, but I was willing to step in at a much lower level than I think most would have agreed to do. But I knew that I had to pay my dues and I was willing to do it. And so that was an amazing run. And from there, I jumped to JP Morgan Chase. I had an opportunity to start my management track, which was what my ultimate goal was. There too, I had a chance to work with a woman, I'll never forget, an executive headhunter who said, let's work on your resume and think about why Ileana. And I went through this very interesting exercise with her on defining my brand. Why me versus everyone else? I didn't have management experience. I landed the job. So now I had an opportunity to lead a group covering the Latin American region. Everyone had many more years of experience than I did. But simultaneously when I was going through that experience, my husband, who's an actor and a writer, was doing research on Jose Marti. Many of you may know him, Cuban poet I admire greatly, and his work is tremendously inspiring to me. And he writes a lot about servant leadership, and he has actually a essay on, and really it's a handbook, on management and servant leadership. And that really became my roadmap. Till this day it is. It really inspires me. And so I made it a point to collaborate and bring others along and have my mission be about helping other people, right? I'm not going to teach anybody their craft. These are people that have been in the business 40, in some cases 50 years. And here I was in my early 20s managing and leading them. And so it really had to be about the team, about collaboration and helping everyone do better for themselves. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What do you want to do? And so after a great track there, I moved over to Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and that has continued to be my mantra. I've had about 9 different assignments in this company. And what I would say the defining moment here for me has been going back to where I started is asking. I made it a point, every manager that I had, make sure that they knew what I ultimately wanted to do, which was to head up a global business. And I didn't know where that was going to land when I started 10 years ago, but I kept telling my story. And I kept asking and encouraging folks to listen. And so fast forward 5 years ago, someone that I had talked to many years ago tapped me on the shoulder and said, we're going to go global, and do you want to go build this business for me, which was tremendous. And then immediately, the what-if syndrome kicks in, which I always tell women, steer clear of the what-if syndrome, which is you overanalyze and think, should I, and, can I have the perfect conditions under which I will accept this role? And I was actually starting to grow my family at the time. So went home, asked like 4 of my girlfriends, everybody said, you're crazy, don't do it. And then I called 4 male friends and they said, of course do it. And so I immediately called my boss the next day, not knowing what the role would look like, where it would be based. I said, I'm doing it. Sign me up, I'm gonna do it. We'll figure it all out as we go along. And as a colleague told me, what's the worst that can happen? 6 months from now, you step down and don't do the job. It's been an amazing run. I did that the last 5 years, and now I'm in this recent role, also global perspective, which I really, really enjoy, just the cultural aspects of delivering to global clients. And so in a nutshell, just going back to what are the stories, what are those defining moments, resiliency, which we talked about today at the luncheon, right? What that does for you in terms of your ability to push through. Ask, ask, ask. Always say yes, and then you'll figure out the details. And have fun while you're doing it. And finally, I couldn't have done everything that I've done without focusing on bringing other people along. Something that my mother always instilled in me, regardless of how hard we were working, we were always helping other people. And so I make it a point today to help others, especially women and Latina. I have the privilege, I know some of you, I also sit on the advisory board for Alpha, and I head up their women's initiative, Women of Alpha, and it's work that I'm extremely passionate about, because if we're gonna take care of Latinos and do what we need to do to make sure that we have our fair share, we have to take care of Latinas, right? So you can't do one without making sure that we address Latinas. So thank you for the question.
Well, it goes to show a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier. The resilience of the Latina, that no matter where they come from, they're able to do the job when given the opportunity. The challenge is just to take it, to have the self-confidence to take it. And just to the left of us is B Perez with Coca-Cola, and she's got a really interesting job, which is Chief Sustainability Officer. When I was growing up, if somebody was the sustainability, it means they were taking care of you, But it means quite different for corporate America, and I think it must be a field that is in development at this point in time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Bea, and how did you get to have this particular job?
Sure, and I'll give some common themes, which you might say, what is she doing? So 2 words, risk and rejection. And I've talked about this before in some other speeches I've given. And you'll also hear some common themes. I had a very strong Cuban mother who left Cuba, in 1959. So I was raised by a very strong woman who never gave up, even when all circumstances looked like they weren't, going to be possible. But risk and rejection. So for me, I've been at Coke 20 years, and I have had wonderful mentors and sponsors, as you've heard. I have a sponsor sitting right there, Rudy Becerra, who always taught me when I came into Coke that pretty much you can do anything. You could work anywhere in the world. We're in 207 countries. We have commercial businesses. We have marketing. We have even a gym in our building. So whatever you want to do. And Rudy really helped me when I first got there to understand that it was up to me to decide what I wanted to do. And I had this moment where I said, wow, eventually I'm going to be a mother and have a family. What do I want to stand for? And I did something pretty morbid. I actually wrote my eulogy. I said, if my children stand up there and are having to talk about their mother after she's gone, what legacy would I have created for this world? Would I have even mattered? And, because we can all stack up a bunch of material things, but at the end of the day, what we leave is our lives through our children, through leaders we've created, through people we've touched around the world. And in several themes in my career, I had unique opportunities to go forward and then, I guess, drop below the balance sheet and go backwards. And there were a few moments. When I first started at Coke, I had been at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and then I had raised my hand to go work at our Hispanic ad agency. At the time, Lionel Sosa owned it. Then it became Sosa, Bromley, Aguilar and Associates, and then Bromley, Aguilar, and then eventually Darcy bought them. And they were just recognized in the Smithsonian for a historic moment for the work they've done. Well, that connection brought me into Coca-Cola to lead Coca-Cola's Hispanic marketing efforts, and I'd done that for quite some time. And I was really excited because we were merging everything into our brand management. And then I made it into brand management. I was the Coca-Cola trademark manager for all of North America at Coca-Cola, and that was huge. And I was about to be promoted again to director when someone came by my office and said, "So, would you like to go have lunch?" And Rudy's smiling because he knows exactly who that person was. He was an officer of our company, very highly regarded. He had been at the company at that time 30 years, and people knew that if he tapped on your shoulder, something great was about to happen, but he had very high expectations. So I was scared to death of this man. And, he was also very odd. So he comes by, I'm sitting in my cubicle, I'm all nervous, and he says, "Are you ready for lunch?" I had put on my best suit, my best heels. I looked perfect as a Latina who shops at Macy's would, So, product placement. But, so it was terrific. And he says, "Well, what do you drink?" And of course I said, "A Coke." Well, what surprised me was he brought us by our vending machine to get a free Coke out of our machine. And here I think, I'm going out for lunch. He takes me to Georgia Tech, because our headquarters is right across the street. We drive through the drive-through, and he orders for me. I thought, this is strange. And he says, "Well, you have your Coke, so I'm not buying you a Coke." I thought, wow, this guy's cheap too. Okay. So we go through, and we pull up in the parking lot, and he says, "Number one, what you've just learned is we always support our customers." He said, "You're at McDonald's because they're our #1 global customer in the world. And we wouldn't have this kind of business without our customer." And so he said, "So anywhere you go in the world, always remember, spend your money with people who support Coke." Then he said, "Number two," he said, "corporate America is like a merry-go-round." He said, "You're going to have a great career." He said, "You work hard, you really care, you want to please your managers." He said, "You can keep going on the merry-go-round." He said, "And you know what, you'll probably, be around the same job grade, because we have job grades, you'll make good money." He said, "The question is, will you make a difference?" And that made me take a deep breath. And he said, "Or you could choose to get off the merry-go-round, have your own point of view." He said, "Because that's really what we pay you for. We don't pay you to just do your job. We pay you to have a point of view and make us better." He said, "And you won't be popular. You won't probably be doing the right political things at times." He said, "And I can guarantee half the room will disagree with you and try to take you out." He said, "But if you get off the merry-go-round, you'll make a difference, you'll make us better, and you'll actually impact our business in ways we need you to." He said, "Or stay on the merry-go-round, nice talking to you." So as we're driving back and pulling into the Coca-Cola into the executive garage, which of course that was my first time ever walking near that executive garage. It's like, ooh, I called it the Bat Cave at the time. But we pulled in and he said, "So I have an offer for you." He goes, "I know you're about to be promoted." He said, "But you don't know the business. You think you do, but you don't." He said, "You've only been on the strategy side." He said, "You need to roll up your sleeves and get into operations." He said, "But it's a demotion. I'm going to demote you 2 job grades. I'm going to cut your pay. They're going to fill your other job. In a year, you'll be out of a job if you don't make this successful." He said, "So that's my offer." He said, "You have a couple hours to say yes." And I walked back up to my little cubicle, and I thought, okay, I'm about to go from this cubicle to that corner office as group director of the brand, or I'm about to go to this other floor to a worse cubicle, have less money in my pocket, and not know where this career is going and potentially be looking for a job in a year. And so what did I do? I took the demotion. And I'll never forget this. Everyone thought I was crazy. Everyone tried to tell me, "You should not do this, don't do this." But in my heart of all hearts, I looked at his track record, and he had created more leaders in our business who were running divisions around the world. He also had very high standards. He had a great respect by the operators of our business. And so I said, what do I have to lose? I'm young. I'll recover if I'm out of a job in a year. I'll find people to help me. And that's, eventually what I did. And so all of a sudden I got into this role, and believe it or not, it was to run NASCAR. So here's a Latina who'd been running Hispanic marketing. Pepsi had NASCAR for 50 years. And I was the person who had to work on it to try to take it away from my competition, build a platform, and make it work for the business. Well, we did, but I realized at that point, too, no one works alone, and success doesn't happen in silos. And so I was lucky that, Mr. Azar, who is that person who offered me the demotion, was the one who I'm very thankful for, surrounded me with a great team of people who had more experiences than I did, knew the business better than I did. He opened doors for me. It was up to me to walk through them and perform, but he opened many doors for me. And the team outperformed. We still to this day have the NASCAR relationship. We have the Coke Racing family. It's one of the most precious assets we have in our sports marketing portfolio next to the Olympics and World Cup, because it's driven significant business results for us, especially across the United States. And that leapfrogged my career. So what I didn't realize was going to happen is a couple years into that, all of a sudden I was running all of sports and entertainment marketing, then all of media. Then I became the chief marketing officer for North America. And so it was someone opening doors for me, but also at the same time, making sure that I knew which doors to open for others too. He held me accountable for how many leaders was I creating along the way. That's how I really met Alba Adamo, who's sitting over here, who's now head of our Hispanic marketing. And I remember Gary saying, this is a bright shining star, and I know you guys talked about shining stars in here, and he said, it's up to you not to just be successful for yourself. It's up to you to pull others with you and make them be successful. And he said, at the end of the day, I'll measure you as a human being based on how many leaders you created in the business, not based on your job title. And so when I got tapped on the shoulder to be the chief sustainability officer, it was a new job, and it was on our 125th anniversary. Muhtar Kent said, we've always done things in the community, women's economic empowerment, well-being, all the environmental work, but we have not connected it to the business the way we should have. And so I was selected in our 125th anniversary to create the foundation of sustainability, and I did. And so our top 3 priorities are water, women, well-being. We've connected into metrics in the business. Our business unit presidents are held accountable for it in their compensation. And we work with our bottling business to align. But that's in a nutshell is what I started to do, but at the same time, back to my eulogy. You know, I know, I'm crazy, aren't I? The titles and things like that are great and they're nice, but the legacy for me was more important. And what I said is I wanted to leave the world better for those other generations. And so all along the way, I would make sure that I got involved in things like the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. So I recently was able to join that board, but it's not the first time that I was involved with them. It was looking at Hispanic students coming up because I was lucky that in my education career, I received scholarships. I could not have done what I did in my academic life if it weren't for people providing me with scholarships. I also work here in Atlanta on the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta board, which is a hospital, because I also know that in Atlanta alone, there's $94 million every single year of unreimbursed health care. And someone has to help raise that money to get that money to those kids who need it, because none of those kids are turned away. A large % of that population are Latino children. And so those are the things that are more important to me. And so I'm really fortunate that I work for a company like Coke that brings my professional life together with my personal life and allows me to actually maintain that legacy for what I wanted to accomplish in my life with my family as well. So I know I went on and on, so I'll make sure I give enough time this way.
Thank you. No, thank you so much, Bea.
Great story. Great story.
And you've done really well on your presentation, if I can judge it by the smile on Rudy's face. You know, our next Latina achiever, and you know, one of our truly gems in our community is a person who has probably more than any one of all of you found herself to be the only woman, the only Latina, among a group of white men and white men with angry people. I mean, white angry men. So Myrna Soto is Chief Security Officer for Comcast, a job for which she has to sign up every day and be under attack every day. She's part of the news that we see all the time. Whenever you see about hackers breaking into banks, hackers breaking into the White House, people looking at Obama's emails. I don't know why, but...
It wasn't Comcast email.
Yeah. Myrna works on all those issues, and not only for her company, but for the rest of the companies across the country and around the world. So, Myrna, tell us a little bit about your journey.
So I don't know how I can follow these two ladies, and thank you for having me and having us. It's a great group of ladies. So everyone in the audience is in for a treat with all the stories they've already heard and the ones that they're about to hear, and I promise to try to keep that at the right caliber. So as Robert mentioned, I'm the Chief Information and Infrastructure Security Officer for Comcast. I have said on many occasions, it's the reason why my hair is curly and remains curly, despite la plancha and everything else that's out there. But my career journey is very unconventional. I have the pleasure of serving a very senior technical security role for Comcast, but I actually did my bachelor's and master's studies in psychology. When I started, so I got to give you a little bit of background. So first of all, I'm very upset because this lady, two seats beside me, lives in Miami. That is where I grew up. I grew up in Miami. My mom is Puerto Rican and my father is Cubano. And we grew up by very modest means in South Florida. My father obviously escaped from Cuba at the time during the revolution. Met my mother in Miami. He actually was working at a gas station at the time, and met her because she needed gas to be pumped for her. Back then they did that. They had 3 children. I am the middle of 3. I am the first of my family to actually go to college and graduate from college. My mother, thank you. Our upbringing and our family life was atypical for that time of the country and what was happening. My mother never graduated from high school, but she was an entrepreneur, ran several businesses on her own. My father dedicated his life to this country because this is the country that took him and his people in, which I know you could certainly appreciate. And he dedicated his life to this country by serving in the military and had a very, very illustrious career in several branches of law enforcement. So every time I tell him about my security stories, he stands up and he is like so proud. But in actuality, I went to school in South Florida, and when I graduated from college, and this is kind of, there's a bit of a hidden message here for folks that are looking at their careers and wondering what they're going to do next. And just like the other 2 ladies have kind of shared some of the things, doors were opened, things happened, and it's what we do with those circumstances. But I remember I was about to graduate with my undergrad degree, and there was a company in South Florida that was recruiting on campus, and they were looking for management trainees. And I was like, that's me. I'm in. And I had the opportunity to work for a cruise line in South Florida. At the time, Norwegian Cruise Lines was owned by the Kloster Cruise family, so it was a Norwegian family at the time. Now it's a publicly traded company and owned by several entities. But I was able to join Norwegian Cruise Lines as an operations manager in a call center. And I often say that was the toughest job ever. You have high turnover, just a ton of issues. Everyone's calling you is either upset, something's going on. But one of the things, like any young person starting their career, I was very motivated to pay off my student loans as quickly as I could, and I wanted to make some money in order to do that. And in the call center space, everything is metrics driven. How long does it take for somebody to pick up the line? What's the abandon rate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the company I was working for had no technology in place. And I often say to folks that I mentor today, never to do what I did, but I'm grateful that I did this for my own story. But I became the squeakiest wheel of the management team. Every morning we had a briefing, a performance briefing. And I said, there's no way I'm going to make my bonus. There's no way I'm going to make my numbers. We need technology. We need some innovation. And they were like, no, we're spending our money on the ships, on the experiences. This is where the money is made. Anyway, I will fast forward the tape because it's a very long story. But after several quarters of being the squeaky wheel, my boss, who I'm very thankful to today, called me into her office and she said, basta. I don't want to hear you complain anymore. You are being so disruptive to the rest of the management team. And I stood there and I'm like, yeah, and? And she said, here's what I'm going to do. She negotiated with me. She says, I'm going to give you this small budget to go away and do one of these projects that you keep talking about. They're going to be so great. But then after that, I don't want to hear another word. Go back to running your team. Go back to running your metrics. Be done. Well, that little check that I got, I went home that day and I said, oh my God, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna, I had no idea what to do with this. So I called around and I called my partners, my vendors that were supplying technology in the call center space. And I did, again, this is number 2, something that I would never want to do today, and that is I promised them something that I was not really authorized to do. I said to them, if you help me and we are successful, more business will come. They all showed up to the meeting. We had the discussion. We talked through a couple of projects. We actually kicked off one. A couple of partners said, sorry, I'm not going to do this. This is too risky. I can't spend resources. You know, there's just too many things that you're expecting of us, and I can't do it. But 2 remained and said, we're going to help you. And we did, for the company, the first IVR system for the call center. After that, that was successful. We went through skill-based routing for the call center agents based on where the call was originating from. From there, we built a sales service desk for international. From there, we did so many different projects. It was a huge success. I kept doing projects as a business unit owner. And the IT department looked over the edge and said, what's going on over there? She built the shadow IT. We can't let that happen. We can't let that happen. And I know now, and I learned it later on, that there were leaders in IT that said, she's not even a technologist. She's a psychologist. She's an operations manager. She doesn't know anything about technology. But the CIO, they didn't call it CIO at that time, I'm dating myself, but the person that was leading the information technology department said, it doesn't matter. We cannot have this woman doing this because this stuff is coming up in every board meeting and every management meeting. We need her to be on our team. Not a bad deal. So I moved from running a call center to joining the IT department, and I've been in the IT space, in the technology space, for 25 years. For 25 years. And I've had the pleasure of being in the security space for the last 11. And that is also a very interesting story in itself. I had worked my way up the ranks in information technology, ran data center teams, ops teams from a network and an infrastructure perspective. I ran software development teams, worked for great companies like American Express, went back to the hospitality industry and worked for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines for a period of years, Kemper Insurance. And then one day, this company way out in the desert of Las Vegas called me and said, I have an opportunity for you. And like most Hispanic families, we're very enmeshed. We all live close to one another. And I had a decision to make, much like the decisions these other 2 ladies have had to make. And that was to move away for an opportunity that was monumental from a financial security perspective, growth perspective, just the world of opportunities that were going to present itself. And I went through the same exercise. Do I go? Do I not go? I called, I this, I that. And my number 1 advisor was my father. And I said, Papi, I have to talk to you about something. This is what's going on. You know, he stood there with his staunch military face, and he said, go. Don't worry about what your mother says. Don't worry about what your grandmother says. Don't worry about what your sister says. Go. He said, go, do what you need to do, never look back, and if it doesn't work out, you come back home. And the moment that he said that to me, it gave me every ounce of confidence to say, I'm moving to the desert. Worst part about it was I couldn't find good Cuban food in the desert. But anyhow, but I moved to Las Vegas and I worked for a company by the name of MGM Mirage. I still say we because I'm still a shareholder. We owned 19 casino resort properties at the time, ran a bunch of technology projects for them, and my CIO at the time called me in, tap on the shoulder, similar, but it wasn't a demotion. Kind of. It was a little risk. He tapped me on the shoulder and he says, I have a problem. You've done all these great things. You're working all these great projects. We've had some great success, but I got a really bad problem. I just got an audit report. And our security controls and IT are suffering, and we have repeated observations, and our operating license at 2 of the casinos is at risk. Now, operating license at a casino means you close, you shut down, you turn everything off. That's death. You can't have that happen. So I said, well, what do you need? What do you need me to do? How can I help you? He says, I want you to run the security team. And I stood there and I said, what? I said, I just built this software development group. We're doing all the sexy projects, all the money, all the capital, all the glitz and the glam. And I said, you want me to run security? And he sold me. He sold me. He sold me on it. He says, I look at your technology resume, and you have everything. And you have security at American Express sprinkled in. You have security at the insurance. Much of the software development that you're doing here at MGM Moran has a security angle to it, but I need you to lead the team. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my knowledge. It was about leading the team. And I obviously, because I had a great deal of respect for him, and he was a great leader, great manager, and a mentor still today, I said, of course, I'll do whatever you need. I went home that night and cried because I thought I was being set up. I said, this is a career-ending move. And I just obsessed about it for weeks. And I'm here to tell you today that that was the best career move I've ever made. I didn't ask for it. I was pushed. I was pushed into it, and I accepted the challenge. But who knew then that cybersecurity was going to be on the mouths of every single person? Now, can't open up a newspaper without seeing it. So that's kind of like how I got to where I am today. But as many of you have also heard these ladies speak about, I'm also very strong about paying it forward. I've had many people that have supported me throughout all these changes, all these advancements. And I have the pleasure of saying that I am the vice president of an organization by the name of HITECH, which stands for the Hispanic IT Executive Council. And it is a wonderful group of executives in IT that their sole mission is what we call push-up, pull-up. It's about the next generation of leaders in IT being able to provide that mentorship, that exposure, and I'm very blessed to be a part of that organization and to support it. And then last but not least, and then I'll turn it over to the next speaker, I know I've met many of you today throughout the networking breaks and lunch. I'm also very proud of the fact that I've just recently been elected to a publicly traded board. So I have on the board of directors of CMS Energy, which is a Fortune 500 organization based out of the state of Michigan, and is one of the reasons why I can't stay too long, because I got to fly to Michigan for a board meeting later. But I think it's a wonderful thing to see a company be very self-aware that they were not diverse in their board. They were not diverse in many ways. Not enough women, no Hispanics, and no technologists. So I guess, I don't know, in the spirit of gambling, they got a trifecta.
And you know, to bring in a Latina like yourself onto the board of directors of a very important company shows that the field that you're in is a field that is so incredibly important and will continue to be a major challenge for every company and every small business and actually every household in our country. The president of HITECH is here. So Andre, we're delighted that you're here. And HITECH is an organization that does wonderful work, you know, in the technology field. And we look forward to have many more security people, or security career mandate people, I should say, you know, coming through, because we really desperately need that. So next to, by the way, don't raise hell at the board meeting anymore, okay?
Let's just say those were life lessons that I still carry today. Oh, and if I may, and I'm going to turn it over before she starts, the person that said coupon, digital wallet. That's the way to go. Macy's has got a great digital wallet. There we go.
I like all these plugs.
Yeah.
We're looking for coupons, gift cards.
Well, next we have Laurene Gandolfo, who happens to be, you know, a vice president with Macy's. And for Laurene, I imagine you live in a very volatile industry where things are changing all the time, and things change year to year. You know, it's going to be different. Season to season, it's going to be different. So it must be very stressful and to plan ahead kind of things, because the trends tend to shift so much, and you're in an industry that is an industry, you know, known for immediate return. If something is not coming through, you yank it out and you bring something else. So for you, the challenge, I imagine one of the challenges has been on on living always in a changing world that is changing every single time that you walk onto the floor, you walk into your office, something new, it's about to happen.
You're right, and that is why I've been in this industry now for like 29 years, and that's what I love about it. First, I just want to say that after listening to all of the speakers before me, I am really humbled because this is a moment that I'd like to say, Deneen, make sure you take a picture, because I am a Cubana also. And my mother would be so proud that I could be sitting here at this, at this podium with these ladies. I was born in Cuba, and I also had a father who came here, and he basically said, we're coming here because this is the American dream, and you can be anything you want to be. He did not have a college education, neither did my mother, but he always kind of said to me, you can be anything. You have to keep striving. And it was never good enough. It was always trying to push you to be better than whatever you were doing. If I came home and I had a 98, he'd say, well, what happened to the other 2 points? Why didn't you get 100? He didn't treat my brother the same way he treated me. I was the one that he kept pushing. And I was raised in Miami. I left Miami and really wanted to go to New York City. I'd gotten into Columbia, and my mother had said, you can't go to Columbia. That's just, you're 17 years old. They're going to kill you up there. So, to this day, I regret not being able to go there. And so instead, my mother said she had, they had done all kinds of jobs while they, assimilated into this country. I ended up going to Brandeis University because that was a nice Jewish university where they would take care of you. And it was like more, family-oriented and all that. I went to business school at NYU, got my MBA in marketing. And I did that only because all this time I was going to be a dentist. So I got into dental school right after graduating from Brandeis. And I was going to be a dentist because all this time my father had said to me, the only people make money around here are the doctors and the dentists. And you're going to do one of those things. And so I always paid attention to Dad, and I was good in science. I said, that works. Okay, I'll continue. Until that moment when I finally graduated and I looked at my life, and I'd been doing all these things for Dad all along. And I said, do I really want to spend the rest of my life looking into people's mouths? I just couldn't see myself in that kind of spirit for the rest. And that was my first decision. That's when I broke off and I said, I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm just going to go to business school while I figure it out, what I'm going to do. So I went to business school. I finally got to New York City. And when I graduated from business school, there was Levi Strauss came to recruit. And I had never thought of a career going into manufacturing. At that time, again, I was a marketing major. Everybody was going to Procter & Gamble, big marketing firms, and that was the way to go. But I decided to interview with this Levi Strauss, and they flew me out to San Francisco. It was a beautiful sunny day, not a fog in sight, and you know how San Francisco is. Mm-hmm. They took me all around the city. I saw these beautiful men, and I'm thinking to myself, this is perfect for me. I'm just going to move from New York City to San Francisco. Everything's going to go for me. It's a beautiful place. I'm going to find a husband. My life is just going to go, in this whole other direction. And I didn't realize, they weren't really interested in me. So I get to San Francisco, and I start in this MBA program, which was really, I was very fortunate to be in. There were maybe like a dozen MBAs from around the country, and I'd been there. I went from factories. I was in El Paso. I traveled with a salesman. I really learned the manufacturing part of, building a jeanswear a business. And I'd been in that company for about 2 years, and I didn't get the next promotion that was about to happen. And so at that time, I really feel like I was very cocky. I had been, at the top of my game, had gotten into the schools I wanted to get into, had always kind of had my way up until that point. And they said, nope, there's somebody that's better than you for this position. So of course, somebody recruited me, and I said, okay, well, I'm out of here, because if they don't value me, I'm just going to go to the next company. So I started my career at Macy's, California. When I got there, I learned my very first lesson. The grass is not always greener on the other side. I was still in the same kind of corporate environment. It started to be who you know, how you got along, how you did what you had to do. And my first lesson was that you really just have to do a great job in the job you're in. And then people would start to notice you. People would start to say, I want that person on your team. Many years later, my current chairman said, you have to kind of bloom where you're planted. And that is so true. I now use that to all the people that I train. And I say, just really do a great job, and just keep striving to be the best that you can be. So I started in the men's area at Macy's, California. I went from being in men's as an assistant buyer, went out to the stores, came back into the ready-to-wear area, did finally meet my husband there, and he decides that he's moving for a promotion to the East Coast, and he was also in retail. And I decided to move from Macy's, California to Bloomingdale's. At that time, Macy's and Bloomingdale's weren't joined, but Macy's, California and Macy's East were two different kinds of divisions. We were like the better part of Macy's, and then the East was the promotional, driven part. So I left that company, went to Bloomingdale's, and that was a completely different experience, because Bloomingdale's was like the jewel of the retail industry. And the training that I think that I received there was something that I've taken. I spent 19 years at Bloomingdale's. And the training I got there has been invaluable to me. And it really came from the man who was the chairman there, Mike Gould. He was kind of like, I felt like he was just like my father. Whatever I did, it was never good enough. It was always about trying to elevate, always trying to be better, always trying to, if you thought you had done it well, have you looked at this other possibility? And he kept challenging me and moving me from one job to another job. I ended up in intimate apparel. I was in ready-to-wear. I was in men's back and again, until the point that he said to me, I want you to interview for this job in the home store. And that's when I said, no. Whoever goes to the home store, they never get out of the home store. Their career ends in the home store. So I just ignored it. I just said, I can ignore it, right? They asked me in an interview. I'm not interested. I'm really happy where I am. Until I got a phone call, and it was him. And and he says to me, I've heard you haven't set up that interview. And then I knew right then and there. There was not a discussion. There was not a choice. If you wanted to keep going up, you just had to go there. So I went into the home store, and I found out, I ended up working for Julie Griner, who became my second mentor. She was one of the toughest women I had ever worked for, but I learned more from her than I had learned from anyone previously. And she really instilled in me this desire to really start speaking up for myself. All along, I had been kind of moved from position to position, but she started to give me, lessons on, you know what, you're really good. You should strive for more. You should ask for things. You should want to be more than what you are. And up until that time, I kind of had finally, I guess maybe because I got slapped in the beginning and I got too cocky, then I got a little kind of lazy and just went wherever they told me to go. And then this woman comes along and she says, no, people should be happy to have you on your team. You got to speak up for yourself and you should, continue. So I spent about 10 more years in different VP roles in the home store, until there came an opportunity as a senior vice president in the Macy's division. At that time now, Bloomingdale's and Macy's is one company. And I said, I want that job, because there were no other jobs now at that point that were open. People that stay at Bloomingdale's at the senior vice president and executive vice president level, they're there for 25 years. They never leave those jobs. So I saw an opportunity to increase and to jump the career, and it was at Macy's, but it was in the merchandising part of Macy's, which is really the product development side that does all the private labels. So I joined Macy's. As soon as I said I wanted to go there, my chairman, Michael, says, no, you don't really need to go there. I can find a job here for you. We can create something. And at that point, I said, I need to move on. I really need to continue my journey and not be afraid to be able to experience something completely different. So I went into the product development side, and probably I finally found my niche of my passion, of what I love. I love developing product. I love building brands. I love being able to travel the world and meet with vendors around, in countries that I never would have imagined I would ever have gone to visit. My biggest country has been in India and China, and I've seen, my life completely changed in the opportunities that I got. And so I did that for quite a few years, and up until 2 months ago. So I've been in home all this time, and I started to think, I'm probably right. Once they get you into home, they never let you out. And they kind of said, because you become an expert in that field. And I had told my boss at the time, again, I spoke up and I said, I'm not done yet. I have more that I can do, and I want to continue to grow. I don't want to leave the company. I want to continue to grow in the company. So what else could I do? I could do anything. I love accessories. I could do anything else, in the company. And about 2 months ago, I get called into my boss's office, and it was like a Friday afternoon. And he says, hi, well, you know how you wish that you wanted something new? Well, I'm about to move into a new role. You now have a new boss, and you're going to the men's and kids area. And so about 2 months ago, I started in men's and kids, completely different field, hadn't been in that field for like 15 or 20 years. But it got to, now I'm in a role of something, a much bigger job, more responsibility, a lot more people. But I feel like I've now gotten the courage to continue to grow. And Deneen says I'm the highest ranking Latino within my company, within our division. But there is a board member who's much higher. I still aspire to continue to grow. And I don't think that there is a ceiling. And I really go, and a lot of the things that I've learned is that I've gotten more courage as I've gone through my career to really speak up and to be able to be more curious and to become more of the voice of the Latino. I had never felt that I was Latino as I grew through the organization, but I started to realize as I learned from traveling with Deneen, that I could make a difference to other people. And so I've become the head of the ERG community in our company. I've become the member for Macy's at the Diversity and Inclusion Business Council. And I've just joined the 30% Club in New York so that we have representation of women on boards. And in doing that, I feel like I've also learned that as I've grown up in the company, I also have to give back. And when I left my last job, my legacy is always to look at the people around and see who are the people I've promoted. When I left the home job, the person that took my job was someone I had been training to take on my job, who is a very, talented African American. I've been very fortunate to have, a lot of people that are very diverse from me. And I like to surround myself with people that are of diverse cultures. Our company has now become much more spirited in diversity and really doing something about it. Our board has now become there's 12 board members, 6 are women, and within the 6, there are 3, 2 Hispanics, one Hispanic, 2 African American, and 1 Asian. So we're really trying to talk the talk now and really be supportive because what's our business? Our business is our customers. And if our customers are changing, we have to kind of understand who they are. And I think that they're really reaching out to listen to the customer, to the Latinos within our company, because they want to learn in order to keep up with the times. But I do have a 20-year-old son, and I worry about him in terms of how he goes on in terms of his career. And he's a little cocky, just the way I was when I first started. and he tells me, it's all about relationships, I'll get a job. I said, no, you're gonna have to pay your dues. So I worry about the young people as they come in terms of trying to help them go and become our future leaders. But that's kind of my story. Awesome. That's great.
Wow, that's a wonderful story. Now, Jovita Carranza has had an illustrious career at the UPS, United Postal Service, in which she worked from being a part-time box person to becoming the only woman ever to lead operations worldwide for UPS in 41 countries in Latin America. And even after doing that, she got tapped on the shoulder by President Bush to serve in the administration. She served as Deputy Administrator for the Small Business Administration. And now she runs a she just launched her what we know is going to be a very successful consulting job. So tell me about really moving up through the floor from the very beginning, Jovita, because it goes a long way to run all those planes and things all over the world, from being, the person taking the boxes at UPS.
Sometimes I felt like getting on that plane and not coming back. But, but I will tell you that before I start this conversation with you all, I want to thank you, Robert, definitely for the invitation, and HACR for having such an aggressive and very focused program, and then, of course, to be with such great leaders. We had a conference call, and it was dynamic, just interacting on how we were going to stage this whole particular forum. But I'd like to mention 2 things. I am not Cuban. I'm Mexican-American. Jole. Second generation. My mother and father were born in Chicago, but raised in Mexico and returned, Guadalajara. Pero they then were raised in Mexico and returned to Chicago. And interestingly enough, they started to love each other, and I happened to surface. So I always tell my mother, fui tu primer pecado. But in addition to the Cuban, I do have 2 things in common with you. One, I received my MBA at the University of Miami. And secondly, my sister married a Cuban, so I have a niece who's half Cuban and
There
half
we go.
Mexican.
You can stay on the stage.
Yes, so I can stay on the stage. Okay.
Good grief.
So I qualified to be on this panel. Thank you very much.
More than
Gracias,
qualified.
Robert. But I will, on a very serious note, and how can I follow such great leaders that just spoke? I have, everything you had, I had to do without. Because I made some early decisions that did not groom me academically very early on. I intermittently went to school while I was raising a daughter, going through a divorce, and still with the Hispanic family culture of ¿Dónde vas? No te la lleves? Where are you moving to? And I said, I'm going to California to start anew. And that's where I began my career with United Parcel Service. And I did start out with UPS as a box handler while going to East Los Angeles College and then Cal State LA. And all I was looking at was a means to an end. I needed a couple of checks to survive. So I not only worked at UPS certain hours, I also worked for B of A during the evening. And I met one of the board members, I think it was the CEO of B of A when I was at the SBA. And there was a consortium of lenders. It was B of A and SunTrust and Exxon. And I said to the gentleman, and don't laugh, this was very humbling for me to say, I said, oh, I once worked at B of A. He said, you did? What role did you have? I said, I flipped hamburgers for your night shift. And he just looked at me, didn't know what to do. Oh. And I was like, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to say because I'm deputy administrator of SBA. But anyway, to me, the career has always been a fun process, a very painful process at times, but I always had to look at the positive side of this trajectory. You have to walk in someone's shoes before you can really appreciate what they have to go through in order to achieve. People say, a legacy, you made reference to legacy, and the only way I know I have one is by a few members in here that have said, I carry your picture throughout my promotional process, and when I received a particular promotion, I looked at your picture and I started crying because I thought, I achieved, I finally, so I was a role model and I didn't know I was that at the time. But at UPS, it was a 30-year trajectory. I also had a defining moment. I didn't load boxes for more than 6 months, but I did supervise package handlers. Then I managed teams in the HR, we call it the employee relations group now. But I spent almost 9 years in HR at UPS. I wasn't all physical. However, I would always go into the system and have to train them physically on how to become proficient. And I had a very generous manager who called me in his office as well, one of those tapping you on the shoulder. And I said, oh, what number did I not make? How many people do I have on the backlog? So all these numbers came to my mind, and he sat me down and he asked me, have you ever thought of going into operations? Now remember, at that time, I didn't know anything about it. I was so naive. I didn't know that you go to operations, it's P&L, profit and loss. And if you do profit and loss, boy, you're a real appeal for executive search firms 10 years down the line. I was very naive. So I said, operations, well, I've dreamt about that. And he said, really? What do you think? Very naive. I said, I've dreamt about that. I've often wondered, how would I actually operate as a manager in operations? It's tractor trailers, it's package cars, it's airlines. And he says, well, what do you think? You want to do it? I said, inside of me, I said, hell yes. I said, of course, yes. Well, can I think about it tonight? And he said, not a problem, I'll talk to you about it tomorrow. So I did, and I chose the operations, not knowing that my first operations was to manage tractor trailer drivers. I was clueless. I only knew how to load them and know how to dispatch them, but I didn't know anything about the feeder tractor trailer drivers. But I learned very quickly. As a matter of fact, the only way that I thought I could learn the operation is to turn it around and ask if I could put the operation on what they call Team MBC. And it's an internal audit. They tear the books apart, and you try to identify all the inefficiencies in an operation. Well, when I I took that assignment and I announced that I wanted to do this process. And my boss said, "Why in the hell would you want to do that?" I said, "Well, that's the only way I could learn this operation." But see, I would be revealing his shortfalls in his operation, so he didn't really accept that very well. But he said, "Okay, if you're willing to do that, fine, go for it." And that was a very defining moment for me because I didn't realize what I was doing. I just realized that by accepting this particular assignment, I was really opening up a chapter in operations and was really exposing myself to how effective I could possibly be working with a non-traditional organization. In every room that every meeting, every room that I entered was, I would say, 98% men. And so I had to learn how to work through that process. Now, you might think it was a very difficult situation for me, but it wasn't. I had a very tough dad, and so he was a real disciplinarian. So for me, I just mentally transitioned that and said, well, authoritative at home, authoritative at work, there's no real big difference. I know how to conform to this and accommodate this type of culture, this type of behavior. And to this day, most of my friends are men because they became my mentor, my coach, my friend, my drinking buddy after the operation, because you have to hang, you have to simulate, right? Okay. So I did all the guy things, but then realized that that was not the most appropriate thing for me to do, and I stopped after a few years. But you have to play the game, Yeah. Oh, should I have said months? Okay. You got to blend. You have to blend in. You have to accommodate the culture. You have to learn how to cultivate the culture as well. Because I always saw myself in every operation that I had at UPS, and I won't go through 30 years, was that what kind of influence can I make? What kind of impact? Because I felt that I was representing every future woman that they would employ. I had to demonstrate that Hispanas definitely could hold their own in that particular type of environment. And so I had to perform above and beyond what the typical manager at UPS performed. And I learned very early on that not all managers are created equal. And so that I had to learn how to select the very, very best manager to emulate and to align myself with, because you are who you associate with, right? So let's fast forward, and I fully retired from UPS after, as Robert said, I had the unique opportunity of managing the airline operation for UPS, and that was 240 aircraft that I was responsible for dispatching every night. And so I had about 10,000 employees. But that wasn't that was my very last assignment, but the assignment prior to that, which was a real treat because I got a title with that. I mean, that was like a new title. I was president of an operation versus vice president. And I was president of Latin America because, in foreign countries, you have to have title in order to have entry. So that's why I became president. But I've carried it all along, and they still carry that title. But in Latin America, I learned that not all Latinos are equal, and not all Latinos have the same speaking, like Brazil and Argentina and Chile and Uruguay, Paraguay. And I traveled more than I ever traveled, even dreamed of traveling. I traveled to Mexico several times. I mean, I had 4 years of Latin America. And we had just gone through an air cargo acquisition. And so I was left with, okay, now transition, this acquisition. And so I thought you'd appreciate this. My job, one of my responsibilities for that particular assignment was to automate all of Latin America. And I was able to transition what we were doing in the United States in Latin America. After I left, now I can leave UPS, I had an executive coach about 6 months prior to leaving UPS. I thought, well, I need to get ready for my afterlife. So what happens after I retire, 30 years with United Parcel Service? I have these disciplines. I don't sit still for very long. I have this particular wealth that I can now, take my time and have a good time doing whatever I need to do. And my executive coach, now remember, I didn't have the same education, so what I did was I could afford Harvard professors, so I contracted Harvard professors to,
Nice.
yes. So I did it the other way, right? I always found a way, but I paid for Harvard executive coaches, and there were 3 professors. And this gentleman said, how many friends do you have out in the field, and how many clients do you know that you could send your resume to? And so I said, well, maybe 25 or so, and so I did that. You know, I followed his advice, and I sent my resume, and he said, anyone in the government? I said, just this one gentleman that toured my operation. He sat through my staff meeting, and he's a Latino, and he works for he serves in the Department of Commerce. He goes, send him one. And I said, I don't even know him that well. We only spent 3 hours together. And he said, well, send it anyway. So I said, okay. Remember, I don't defy Harvard. So I said, okay, I'll do what you say. I'm paying you big bucks to advise me accordingly, so I'll do it. Well, a month later, I get a call from the president's personnel office. And my husband was washing dishes at the time, and I said, I do believe in role reversal. And I said, and I'm proud of it. So I said, excuse me, this is David, I remember his name, David Clark. And he said, yes. Could you repeat what office you're from? He says, yes, this is from the president's personnel office. And I thought, this is a crank. Someone is calling and playing a joke on me because they know I'm retired. And I said, turn the water off. You know, because he was washing the dishes. And so what? I said, turn the water off. So immediately, I said, yes, and I had my pad and paper, and he's giving me all these instructions. Now, we have 5 agencies that are available, and with your background, and I had spent, for those who think that you can create your own resume, and it is the resume of all resumes, I spent a couple $1,000s to put that resume together. Because I had not touched a resume in, 25 years or so? So someone advised me, get the best. So that is the resume that ended up in the president's personnel office that they were looking at, and they were very impressed with the background. And they wanted for me to go into FEMA, and my executive coach said, don't go to FEMA, nobody can fix FEMA. So I said, okay, okay, no problem. And they wanted Homeland Security, and because I managed security people, I managed IT, and with the airline, I had all kinds of experience. And they said, Department of Commerce, this, and they said SBA. I said, is that a cabinet? And they said, no. I said, no. Department of Treasury, well, that sounds great, money. And had I accepted that position, I would have had my picture on your bills. But I decided to go to SBA because I thought, alignment. I want to be successful. I only have a short window to make an impact in the government. And they were ecstatic. And I was very privileged and humbled to work with an administrator, serve with an administrator who was Six Sigma, black belt. He was like totally what I was doing at UPS. And I really wanted to make a difference in 2 years. So I told my administrator, I will put 48 months in 24 months. I will do whatever you need to do. How many priorities do we have? And when he gave me 22, I almost passed out. But I did that in 2 years. We made very significant milestone contributions. If you go to SBA website.gov, that emergency response plan was something my team created. I had like a 5-person team, and we created it for all of the small businesses in the United States. So that's serving under President Bush. I would have served under any president. I wasn't all that political. It was a matter of, he was the first one to call, so I did. After that, I realized that I had a significant background that I could leverage and make a real big impact. And by the grace of God, I had enough savings where if someone asked, would you be willing to serve on the American Cancer Society board? Would you be willing to help us out with this Alverno Women's College and serve on this board? And I didn't look at, well, how much is it going to pay? How many shares is it? I mean, I did that for the corporate board, but for the non-for-profit, I said, you know what? I want to develop leaders, much like I trained all my supervisors and managers and division managers. I want to make an impact in developing the next generation of leaders. And so I did, now American Cancer Society asked me to help them develop a corporate mindset and a corporate council, advisory council that they were going to put. So that's the brand I said I would adopt. I'm going to bring corporate mindset in these non-for-profits. So when I would sign up for them, I'd say, I need to be in policy. I don't want to be just a member. Give me responsibilities. Let me chair a committee, etc. I learned how to ask and be specific because I was so naive when I first started my career track. I said, I'll never make those innocent mistakes in the past that I made in the past. And so I was much more specific. Why? Because I realized that my example was going to impact their bias or images of Latina women. And the boards that I accepted to participate on were either going through transformational, in other words, we're trying to diversify our board. Oh, good, okay, fine, I'll sign up. And then one of the boards, I brought Robert Bard on one of the boards, and he's added significant value in one of the boards. And then we were able to bring UPS Store, an Hispanic woman on the scoreboard. For the other boards, we brought women, Northrop Grumman, AOL, you name it, Goldman Sachs. So it's not just the mom and pops, but it's like the top 100 organizations that I still engage with and that I am still learning from and that I definitely am trying to change the image of Latina women serving non-for-profit boards, as well as priming them to not be so fearful of considering Latina women for corporate boards, the private sector.
Jovita.
You're welcome.
You know, we become so fascinating with the stories that we have let them pretty much give you a roadmap of what to do. The most important thing I think that every single one of them mentioned is that they were not afraid to take a chance. And when they talk about not afraid to be a chance, every single one of them mentioned their parents. And for all of you who are parents, you know, that's something that we really need to learn. We need to encourage our children that they can do anything and that we'll stand behind them and that we'll have a chance to succeed. So I don't want to close the panel without at least giving one person the chance to ask a question. So please.
Don Roberto, thank you. Wow, wow. Let me stand down. My tacos hurt, but that's okay. Outfit by Macy's. We just had Anna from Delta Airlines. Sorry to be rude. We just had a huge survey at our company with 80,000 employees, and the number one concern that they had was they need help, majority, with balance. How did you balance between family and work?
Okay, and remember, you know, we have very short time,
Yes.
so keep us short, okay?
30
I'll
seconds.
defer.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So let's give everybody a chance to ask. Okay.
There is no such thing as balance, right?
Right.
That's number one. There is. I searched for that over 10 years, chasing it. You know, like one day I would be able to just sit it. It doesn't exist, right? It's about integration. We all know that. So in my mind, it's three things. Number one, make sure your partner supports you. Mine definitely does. Make sure you work for a company that promotes work-life integration. Bank of America does a phenomenal job of supporting not just women, but men in doing that. And number three, then have the courage to integrate. Because it does take courage, right? And sometimes we try to hide away from it, not disclose. You have to integrate. You have to make sure people around you that you collaborate and work with know that you're seeking an integrated approach between family and work, and it works beautifully.
And I'll just add to that, because Coca-Cola is the same. You know, we support, you know, all sorts of flexible working policies, people around the world with different circumstances. The biggest lesson I learned was I used to be in hiding, right? I would sneak out to go to my kids' activities, or I would say that, you know, I had a business meeting. And I realized I was doing a disservice to everyone around me, including myself. And when I became very vocal about, well, actually, I'm scheduling on my calendar my parent-teacher conference, and I'm not going to miss my daughter's choristers on Friday, I'm sorry, we're going to have to rearrange these schedules if you want me to actually participate. And I color code my calendar. And so my children's color is purple. When I find that I don't have enough purple on my calendar, then I start to question my own priorities, because my number one priorities are my family and then my work. So I look at the colors on my calendar, and my assistant knows it, the people around me know it. And what I have found is actually I've not only helped the women in my business, but also the men. I have one gentleman on my leadership team who used to sneak out every Wednesday to go to these meetings, you know, and he finally came up to me. He said, you know, I'm actually taking my son to the Dutch school because I want him to learn the language, because that's where my family's from. Thank you for being honest about your life, because now I can be honest about mine. And I realize that we all have to be more transparent, because that helps everybody.
You know, I got to add to that the balance is key. There is no such thing as that ultimate given. I made a decision early in life not to have any children, and that allowed me the opportunity to do things that others probably couldn't at the time. But it also has an adverse impact. It's very easy to say, well, Myrna doesn't have any kids, she'll do that. I found myself sneaking out for meetings. Those meetings happen to be on a golf course. But, but you know, the reality is that there is no such thing as a balance. There's choices that we make. Correct. And there are, and I'm going to use a strong word, you know, we said a lot up here about asking. It's really demanding. You know, you need to be able to recharge. You need to be able to have that time, either for yourself, for your family, for whatever it is. And if your values don't align with a company, then you have to align yourself with another company.
You know, I would agree with them, and one of the things that I started to do more is I started to say, this is important. You know, when you have people that are happy in your jobs, they work harder for you. So I think being transparent about that is important. I did start in the beginning part of my career where I would sneak away, or I'd be guilty about going to be at my son's baseball game. And I was lucky to have a husband who really, I would get to the game and they'd go, oh, that's who you are. They didn't know who I was. And so I really started to feel guilty about it. As I got more advanced in my career, I realized that's really important. He is my whole life. So being transparent and being able to let the people that work for you also know that they can do it and it's okay has become the way of how it is today, more so than it was probably like 10 years ago.
Ditto.
That's automation.
It's been a pleasure to have had this opportunity to sit here with all of you. And you know, one of the things that you have to notice is the companies that these ladies work for. Because companies that are extraordinary provide extraordinary opportunities. So please follow, you know, the companies that they work with. You know, for us, we have a program called the LATINAStyle 50, in which we recognize the best companies for Latinas to work for. And nearly every company is mentioned there. And it's mentioned for a reason. You need to find your right fit. And finally, on a personal note, I want to thank ACER for giving me the opportunity to be here with these ladies. And I would like to ask all of you, remember that every single one of us here, we have the privilege of being sitting here with some of our brothers and sisters, mothers, and all kinds of people in our families are putting their lives on the line very far away to protect us in our way of life. As a parent with my wife, Lupita Colmenero, who have a child who's about to leave for Afghanistan, please keep all of them in your prayers, and us as well. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.